National Committee is meeting today, in a certain sense, in a very good time, a very different political climate than when we gathered back in the winter. I think it was February. And that's very good news, because back then, if you recall, the anti-MAGA movement had not yet recovered from the shock of the MAGA victory. You know, some things were happening, but more or less it was still kind of quiet. Today, however, it is clear, I think, to anybody who has an objective point of view, that the resistance is back, and it's back in a big way. The resurgence of a broad and spirited democratic opposition to the Trump agenda is arguably the most important development of the last several months. What began somewhat tentatively in the winter, with scattered protests and spontaneous but very important boycotts at Target in the first place, Tesla, blossomed in the spring into a full-blooded national protest movement. Here, the April 5th hands-off demonstrations, along with AOC and Bernie's oligarchy tours in the red states, all of that anger coming forward stand out for attention. So too with May Day around the country. In fact, the May Day protest of local unions and central labor bodies, along with the immigrant rights movement, were particularly important, particularly for us. They were big, they were militant, and they were unifying. And they showed, I think, what was possible in terms of building the unity, the breadth, and the diversity of the people's movement. And what was possible took a huge leap forward with the June 14th No King's Day actions that brought together several million people into the streets denouncing the Doge cuts, the arrests and deportations, and the growing lawlessness of Mr. Mann's administration. Then came a political earthquake, and it happened in New York City. And it happened on June 24th, when voters chose by double digits the Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani as their candidate for mayor in the Democratic primary. It was it was one hell of a thing. It was a campaign about affordability, about dignity, about a recognition of the irreversibility of the diversity of our city, and in fact, our country. Its success marked a shift, particularly among young voters, from the politics of protest to the protest of politics as defined by Wall Street and the political establishment. And this is a shift that should make everybody sit up and pay attention. And that includes on the issue of unity, because as the November election approaches, as you can imagine, tactical questions are going to be front and center. Think about it. Will corporate Democrats follow their standard script of spreading the left to woo the center, as they did twice with Bernie? Or will they choose to build on the energy and excitement generated by the Mamdani campaign? It's an important question. On the other hand, will the campaign itself manage to keep its head and resist provocations and splits? And I tell you, they're going to go all out in what is sure to be an attempt to defeat it. And as you know, if you've been paying any attention to what's happening in New York in the national news, they're coming at it every which way already. So left-center unity, a big issue. But in New York, not only is left-center unity at stake, multiracial unity is as well. Here, expanding the campaign's already ethnically diverse base to increase support among African Americans will be essential to putting together a winning coalition. And the recent endorsement of New York Central Labor Council of the Mamdani campaign should help. In fact, it should help a lot. As we know, unions enjoy high membership and support among people of color. In fact, for that reason alone, in involving the labor movement nationally is key. Attendance at the spring protests, important as they were, was overwhelmingly white. But as quiet as it's kept, that's not the whole story. There were important exceptions to that general rule, including a March anti-Doge protest in New York, and then May Day, as I spoke about a couple of minutes ago. The March action was organized by a working families party and a group called Make the Road by Walking. A labor community coalition made it happen. The May Day events were diverse, not only because of who makes up our unions, but also because of their fighting stance on the issues that affect their membership, from DEI and healthcare to deportation. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that folks had a reason to turn out, in support of their own self-interest. And that should be instructive. The only question is, will the anti-MAGA movement draw the lesson? And speaking of lessons, there's no substitute for involving folks on the ground floor. And that was a major problem during the winter as the movement developed, no matter what the reasons were. The lack of involvement of people of color helped exacerbate perceived slights and fed efforts to widen divides. And as we all know, there were such efforts. Attempt to correct this error, no matter how well intentioned by invitations to a table that has already been set, are, to say the least, a little wanting. The upcoming July 17th Make Good Trouble protest this coming Thursday, along with the August 28th March on Wall Street, organized by Sharpton and the National Network, and that coalition present opportunities to move this whole thing forward. And that's critical because, as we have emphasized many times before, no movement for democracy in the United States has any chance of success without the central participation of people of color, African Americans in the first place. The recent resolution, which I shared this morning with the National Committee, by the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, urging the AFL-CIO to call a national march They're calling it a National Union Day of Solidarity in Washington, D.C., should be seen in this context. You know, not only are Black, Latino, and Asian workers disproportionately impacted by the Doge cuts, they are also the main targets of the recently passed MAGA bill. Their families, their communities will be most affected by the deportations, cutbacks to Medicaid to the tune of almost $1 trillion, food stamps, and other programs. CBTU's appeal to the AFL-CIO, therefore, should be understood as an urgent call to white union siblings for solidarity in defense of issues that are in everybody's interest to solve, in the interest of the entire class. The question is, how and when will labor respond? And it is critical that labor responds. It is the only force in the country that can speak to the ruling class in the one true language that it understands, and that is the language of power. The fact of the matter is that the growing protest movement, despite all the demonstrations and lawsuits, and they've been great and important and essential, and we wouldn't have it any other way, but they have yet to significantly slow the Trump offensive. And one of the big reasons is that labor's presence has not been felt widely and forcefully enough. You know, labor has yet to talk that class struggle talk to the bosses. And now we're faced with a situation, y'all, where one of the few remaining checks on the bosses has been upended by the Supreme Court. And so with the country's highest court and Congress now aligned with the Oval Office's power grab, the space for pushing back has grown increasingly narrow. Well, what we're trying to say is that is not now the time. Is not now the time for labor in coalition with its allies to take a demonstrable stand. And this is precisely why a national march on Washington grows in importance with the passing of each day. So let's do it now before, you know what I'm saying, it's too late to do it. Such a march could be a platform for saying hell no. More than that, it could be an organizing occasion for the upcoming midterms. You know what I'm saying? Coalitions brought together to attend. You know, you come back home, could turn to working on the elections. Imagine local unions, community group, religious community, civil rights, women, LGBTQ, youth and students, seniors, the disabled, who we don't pay nearly enough attention to, the unaffiliated, the unregistered, local business, uniting all to kick the GOP out of the House and out of the Senate. These independent political forces could work with the Democrats, with Working Families Party, with others, you know, to find candidates, register voters, turn out to vote. And And by independent political forces, we're talking about the trade unions and other organizations that operate outside of the Democratic National Committee's official circles and have their own election infrastructure. Unions have their own independent candidate selection process. They have their own fundraising, their own mailing list, their own phone banks, their own media, their own get out the vote operation. And so do some others. Organizing efforts could prioritize working alongside them in order to maximize a collective impact. We sure enough need to maximize collective impact this time around. I want to say here that putting forward our own candidates has to be part of these efforts. For far too long, comrades, the party's electoral work has, with the exception of some districts, for example, Connecticut, consisted in coalescing every election cycle with the broader Democratic movement to defeat far-right candidates, but without running for office ourselves. What began in the 1980s as an absolutely correct tactical adjustment somehow became a permanent, now decades-long policy, the 90s, 2000s, 2010, now we're in the middle of 2025. In practice, that amounted to sacrificing our existence as an independent electoral force, and it didn't get rid of, but it minimized greatly our posture as a working class revolutionary political party. The time is way past for this self-defeating practice to end. While it is essential to defeat far-right candidates and work within the broad, united, and people front efforts, this cannot come at the expense of shutting ourselves down completely, or even at times supporting other left candidacies. Everything depends on time, place, circumstance, conditions. And naturally, we should not pursue strategies that risk helping MAGA Republicans. And we're not going to do that. Our primary objective must always guide our electoral tactics. And our primary objective is to defeat the MAGA right, to defeat these fascists. But part of our primary objective must be to build the Communist Party. Of course, in many aspects of party activity, we're building from the ground up. And the election arena is no exception. Standing for election must become a basic feature of our rebuilding process. That we've been walking down that road now since Rosanna and I got elected. Beginning at the local level, we must become experts. And Joe Henry has been emphasizing this, and he's absolutely right, in all aspects of electoral politics, election law, campaign financing, canvassing, use of a voter registration list, advertising, developing a platform, making commercials, and so on and so forth. With these objectives in mind, let us consider, comrades, holding a national electoral conference early next year. As with many things in life, you know, the most important thing at the beginning of any process is the first step. And the first step should be to prepare us, number one, to take on the MAGA forces in concert with others, and number two, to run ourselves. Huh? The good news here is that I hear we have several candidates who are preparing to do just that. In fact, that news, comrades, have inspired me to consider running for office myself. The first time in my life I've seriously thought about it. And with the National Committee's permission, I would like to consult with the New York district of the party about doing just that. I have only one request. Maybe it's a condition. I ain't trying to run as a Democrat. So we got to find some other line, you know, for me to run in the city. Comrades, navigating next year's election terrain will be extremely complicated, but navigate it we must. Everything depends on defeating those fascists in the Congress. And as recent events suggest, they're vulnerable. They are vulnerable. There is fury at the grassroots over the mass firings, at the union busting. One, I think it's Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, 1 million workers, federal workers, you know, they just got rid of their collective bargaining rights. Furious at the immigration roundups, along with the deployment of troops in our communities. And now that $1 trillion in Medicaid, and they promised, well, you know how they lied. On top of which, the MAGA regime is extremely unstable. There are huge public disputes between different warring factions in the GOP. And now, Mr. Elon, High Hitler Musk is calling for the creation of a third party. But not only are they're not the only ones fighting an internal civil war. These kinds of debates are also, from what we read in the press, consuming the Democrats. Labor leaders have resigned from the Democratic National Committee, where there are also huge leadership and policy disputes. Not that they're the same. I'm not trying to say that, but these tendencies are taking place. It is within this context that there is also growing unrest over the Trump administration's US imperialism on crack international policy. It's claimed to be an administration of peace, which we thought was always laughable, disappeared with the bombing of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, along with any hope that they back away from supporting the Gaza genocide and the complete removal of the Palestinian population. But did anybody think in their wildest dreams that they'd start off their administration threatening to annex Canada and Greenland and occupy Panama? I didn't. Clearly, there is a dangerous new aggressiveness as US imperialism tries to remain top dog in the face of competition from other imperialist countries. And this aggressiveness heightens the danger of direct conflict with China, Cuba, and other countries either building socialism or moving in a socialist direction. And Chile might be added to that list with our sister parties winning of the left primary in that country a few days ago. And we send them our heartfelt congratulations. And then, of course, there are the now on again, now off again, I can't keep up, tariffs, which if ever enacted are sure to increase the cost of living for those of us who can least afford it. And with that, there's the bullying and threats against other countries, most recently directed at Brazil and the Workers' Party government of Lula, who hosted the BRICS summit very recently. Comrades, needless to say, none of this bodes well. And public confidence in the two political parties, the courts, Congress, and the mass media continues to dwindle. I ain't got to tell you that prices remain high, wages remain stagnant. And for this reason, strikes, after having declined slightly last year, are back up. And if current trends continue, the number of strikes might equal, if not exceed, levels reached during the pandemic. Yes, taken as a whole, you take the uptick in strikes and the reemergence of the resistance, there is a rising tide of struggle in our country, and with it, opportunities for continuing to build a mass party and young communist league. Party growth, as measured by the circulation of our press, the People's World, and our other social media outlets, CPUSA.org, Good Morning Revolution, and so on and so forth. And our recruitment numbers remain steady. In some cases, it's rising. Importantly, very importantly, we reached our Spring People's World Fund Drive goal. We brought in 125K by May Day. I think we're upwards around 140, 150,000. And now we're getting ready for the fall campaign. We got to raise that extra amount, that 50,000 by the end of the year. And most importantly, our clubs remain extremely active throughout this spring upsurge. Here, we must take note of our initiative and participation in the Boycott Target campaign in DC, and they're helping to pull together a very important coalition, including the Black Ministry, and a number of other clubs are doing it as well. Let us keep the pressure on. I want to announce to the National Committee that we have 10,000 boycott target cards ready for distribution and to help give an additional boost to our efforts. And, you know, this is the front of the card. And then it has, you can take a pledge on the back and learn more, get more information. And we already sent some out to a number of clubs and districts on Friday, with more coming. With regard to boycotts, I'm told that the party needs to add Home Depot to the list. So Target, Home Depot, will be our priority. I don't know where I'm going to shop anymore. I get all my cheap towels at Home Depot, $6 a. Anyway, so too with the BDS campaign. Boycott, divest, sanctions against Israel. It must become a top priority. Palestinian solidarity must be stepped up, and our upcoming conference in November must help ensure that that happens. Comrades, a list of priorities in the coming period should include the following 5 things. Number 1, continued protest in the anti-MAGA movements and involvement and use of the rapid response proposals coming out of our Political Action Commission. And when we talk about participation in the events of the labor and people's movement, we're at the NAACP conference now. You got Dom and Emma and Eric there. Then there's the LACLA conference at the end of the month. I believe that that's in Atlanta. You got Urban League coming up in Cleveland in a few weeks. You got the Congressional Black Caucus coming up in September, and so on and so forth. And these are just some that I know about. I'm sure that there are others. Number 2, we have to push for resolutions in support of that national march that CBTU has called. And it just don't have to be in the labor movement. You can go to your church. You can go to your community organization. You can go to your affinity group. You can go to the environmental movement, the women's movement, LGBTQ, wherever we are active, PTA, and involved and encourage them to support this initiative. You heard what I had to say about why it's so important. Number 3, boycott Target and Home Depot. Number 4, and I'm sure the Political Action Commission will talk about that, we have to identify the key 2025 election campaigns, including our own. Number 5, Palestine solidarity. And last, but certainly not least, we need to complete the People's World Fund Drive, y'all, by the end of the year. The party's work is improving, particularly at the grassroots level. At the same time, we must acknowledge that many of the problems that we addressed at the convention remain in search of a solution. That includes consolidating club and district leadership collectives. We still got a long way to go there. Local circulation of our press in a consistent, regular, systematic way, completing our fund drives goals and helping build the YCL. We want to ensure that the YCL has a convention. At the national level, many areas of work remain unfulfilled for lack of having comrades willing and able to anchor them. We spoke about that in June in Chicago the year before. And yet, comrades, we continue to search for solutions, understanding that they come with time and growth, and that the important thing here is that we're growing. We had to be patient, but impatiently patient, if you know what I mean. Comrades, and I'll end with this. The danger of fascism has increased dramatically since the election. I think that's indisputable. Our class and our people are confronting the most dangerous administration in our history. racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, sexism, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ hate have increased dramatically. That big, ugly monstrosity of a bill recently signed into law has supercharged massive infusions of capital to target immigrants. Do you know that it's 3 times the amount allotted yearly to the FBI? 3 times. ICE enforcement, expansions of capital amount to tens of billions of dollars a year. Total earmarked is $170 billion in that bill over the next several years. In contrast, the FBI's annual budget is approximately $11 billion a year. You know, talk about funding a police state. But we do not despair. The people's movement to preserve democracy, in fact, to expand it, is gathering in strength, and its unity and potential is something you cannot put a price on. And even if you could, you couldn't buy it. We enter, therefore, the upcoming battles with that knowledge, buoyed, inspired by the rebirth of the resistance, with the joy and hope that comes with struggle.